Are you sure? Another cinephile? Yeah, you're not wrong. It is taking us forever to get that Franchise Wars episode done. Okay, I trust your logic and decision making. Roll the intro. Hey there, I'm Carmilla. I'm a cinephile, and I've always been a cinephile. When I was growing up, movies were the things that got me through life. They were the art I consumed. I didn't become a reader until middle school, and didn't discover the wider world of music until about the same time, so before then, it was the movies I escaped into, and boy did I consume a lot of them. I say that like I somehow started consuming less movies after the age of 13, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that's not important. Moving on. The two movies that spoke to me most are Mad Max and The Terminator. Sure, the sequels to both films were cultural watersheds and cinematic masterpieces that changed the landscape of cinema, but there was something about those gritty, low-budget originals that really moved me, which is what art is all about. My insatiable appetite for cinema has led me in search of movies that remind me of those two, and it's those discoveries I want to explore here. I want to find out what about those films spoke to me and why they still do, and what, if anything, they have to say today. So, let's see what's on the reel today. Ooh, cyberpunky. Nemesis is a 1992 film written by Rebecca Charles, directed by B-movie maestro Albert Payun. I'm gonna go with Payun. I'm less likely to screw that up. And before you give me shit for making fun of a Hawaiian last name, the internet doesn't know how to pronounce it either. Anyway, Nemesis is a 1992 film written by Rebecca Charles, directed by B-movie maestro Albert Payun, and starring everyone's favorite French kickboxer Olivier... Nope. Stop getting ahead of me. Everyone's favorite French kickboxer Olivier Gruner, Tom Thomerson, Merle Kennedy, Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa, Marjorie Monahan, and Brian James, with probably the most insane accent in B-movie history.
The Southwest Asian Hui. Some second-class cyborg. What's her name?
Julian.
Yeah, Julian is fronting for her. Huh?
For comparison, this is what he really sounds like.
Hey, what's with all the questions? This is your union. It's for your own protection. So shut up and sign the fucking form.
Yeah, he's been in more famous stuff, but I don't care. This movie also has an early performance by Thomas Jane, credited as Tom Jeans for some reason, where he shows his butt and then gets killed. He plays a character named Billy, which we know not because they say his name 9 times in under 5 minutes, but because he has his name tattooed on his shoulder. We also have a small part by Jackie Earle Haley, but I didn't recognize him. His character is named Einstein.
Why didn't you see that wall?
Shut the fuck up, Einstein!
Anyway, enough about the cast. I love this movie, which admittedly is kind of the point of this show, but it's not just because it's got some killer action and cyberpunk tropes and young Cammy crush fodder in the character of Max. The movie speaks on a deeper level about the nature of what it is that makes us human. Well, not too deep a level, since the first half of the movie mentions it non-stop, but you get my point. With us as a species creeping ever closer to full-blown transhumanism, this is a concept philosophers have been discussing with increasing frequency. Transhumanism is a subject that's always fascinated me personally, and I am all the way on board for a post-human world. This is coming from someone who is actively biohacking myself a whole new gender. This film is all about the identity of the self. What defines us as human, and where is that threshold where we stop being human and become robots, and Can robots ever be considered human? At one point, after being forced to receive ever more extensive modifications, our main character Alex actually dwells on whether one day they may remove his soul. This movie isn't short on plot, though it doesn't bother to spend much time explaining it. Explosions, not exposition, as I like to say. This is quite a feat considering the movie has a voiceover. Olivier Gruner plays Alex Rain.
Alex Rain?
Good fake name, yeah?
An LAPD cop on the trail of a terrorist group called the Red Army Hammerheads. While the Hammerheads brand themselves as cyborg freedom fighters, we're given a pretty black and white explanation of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. We get an action scene where Alex saves a puppy and then is blown literally to pieces. Then he spends time rebuilding and recovering, and we follow him to Old Baja, where he's tracked down the leaders of the Hammerheads who tried to kill him. The line of who's on the right side of the robot-human debate is blurred when the cyborg who shot him asks him how much of him is still human.
You're mostly machine. You're not really human anymore, are you?
86.5% is still human.
After he shoots her, we're introduced to Jared, Alex's former lover, who also happens to be an android. He accuses her of not being human, and she brings up the philosophical point of the self and personhood, implying she is every bit as human as Alex. Anyway, Jared's trying to bring Alex back to the LAPD. He refuses, and we have another abrupt time jump to sometime later in New Rio, where Alex has grown a sweet 90s mullet and is working freelance doing something? It doesn't matter. He's also addicted to pain drugs now. Then he's shot by a guy with a gun in his eye and imprisoned, where even more cybernetic work is done to him. Here we meet his old boss, Commissioner Farnsworth.
Good news, everyone!
Who tasks him with doing one final job for the LAPD: go to Indonesia and track down Jared, who's gone rogue, before she sells information to the Hammerheads. Oh, and he also has a bomb in his chest that will explode in 3 days if he doesn't do it. So he cuts his mullet and goes to the island of Shanglu, and 30 minutes into a 95-minute runtime, the movie starts. Now this is where we're introduced to Julian and Tom Jane's butt. Don't get too attached to it though, and holy hell are they sweaty in this scene. Anyway, Alex is attacked by some thugs, and we find out Farnsworth is there too, who we found out is actually double-crossing Alex so he can flush out Jared. He's also spying on Alex through a camera secretly implanted in Alex's eye. We then meet Angie Liv, the leader of the local crime syndicate. So Julian, the sweaty naked one who killed Tom Jane, shows up and removes the camera from Alex's eye and tells him Jared died when escaping from the LAPD. But now she's on a flash drive, and Alex can talk to her whenever he wants on his DS. But what about the bomb in his chest? Are they going to have difficulty dealing with that now that Farnsworth can't eavesdrop anymore? No, actually, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. It's funny because I'm referencing another more popular YouTuber. Julian implants Alex with a jamming device to prevent Farnsworth's people from detonating the bomb. Okay, where were we? Right, so Jared has information for the Hammerheads. We're actually a group fighting to save humanity from androids trying to take over the world by replacing prominent humans, led by the android who replaced Farnsworth. So Alex needs to get Jared to the volcano before Farnsworth's people break the encryption on the jammer and blow him up. The plot of this movie is kind of a mess, and it does a pretty poor job of making it clear, so let's speed it up. Shooting, running, exploding, and we're introduced to Manic Pixie Cut, Max Impact. The names in this movie are kind of insane. She knocks him out, and we find out she works for Angie Liv, who is secretly the leader of the Hammerheads. More shooting, more running, more exploding, Farnsworth and Alex fight, and Farnsworth gets all blowed up. But he rises all Terminator-like, and it's Alex Farnsworth round 2, this time with 70% less organic matter. Alex loses an arm, and Farnsworth falls into the volcano. But the movie isn't over yet. It's vignette time again. Alex is put back together and Jared dies for real, but not before a touching moment between them. Then it's time in LA again to kill another of Farnsworth's people. Then we get the actual end of the movie with a nice little joke about Alex getting through a metal detector.
Tell me something though, Alex, huh? How are we gonna get you through the airport metal detectors?
Piece by piece, Max.
Like any good B-movie master, Albert Pine made a bunch of sequels. The end of this movie is a perfect setup for the further adventures of Alex and Max, which I would have been all about. There's so much they didn't explore. But instead, the sequels are decades later, all post-apocalyptic with a new cast, so I never saw them. Oh, hang on, my producer's saying something in the other room. Yeah, what's up? Really? They made a fifth one of these? In 2017? That's 21 years after the last one. Dang. I guess we're going to have to add Nemesis to the franchise wars now. I know I need to get that episode done or the references here won't make any sense. Get off my back about it. YouTubing is hard.
Hey! What's the matter, you?
Philosopher René Descartes talked about the idea of personhood by saying that a person exists in two mutually exclusive realms. He called them matter and thought. Under this interpretation, our minds are what make us human, typified by his famous, "I think, therefore I am." It doesn't matter how much of the body is lost or replaced, this doesn't alter the fundamental things that make us human. These ideas were debated and refined by people like Immanuel Kant and David Hume, but for our purposes, the general idea remains much the same. Alternatively, Friedrich Nietzsche rejected the Enlightenment ideas about a separate consciousness, instead saying that the idea of the mind and body are a single construct. Philosopher Peter Strawson clarified this idea by saying that thinking entities, or persons, are basic material entities with both physical and mental properties. Philosopher Derek Perry, why do I keep saying philosopher? If they're talking about what it means to be human, they're a philosopher. Derek Perry added to this by saying that personhood comes with a continuity of consciousness, meaning that a person is a person who is a person as long as they have been a person and remain a person. It's easy.
This is a mess, morally speaking. This is a putrid, disgusting bowl of ethical soup.
Okay, well how about we just chill?
This brings up the transporter paradox, but that's a whole other discussion. At the most basic of basicallys, the two general fields of thought are the thing that makes us human is either our ability to think about ourselves or our physical beings. Both of these ideas carry over into transhumanism and posthumanism in the idea of digital uploads and copies of the human mind, but that's not really Alex's dilemma, nor the question we're asking today. When we start, Alex is a Nietzscheist. The majority of his body is still human, and therefore, he is still human. He views his implants as other, and every time a part of his body is removed, he becomes less and less human, voicing an existential dread at one day losing so much he ceases to be. This is further explained and rebuffed by the character of Jared. She is purely synthetic, an android, and they were once close. Alex says she's not human and therefore cannot actually feel. Jared, of course, claims the opposite. As the film progresses, we see Alex give over to the nihilism at the erosion of his soul and loss of self, doing only what he needs to survive. This changes when he reunites with Jared, now a purely digital being. Devoid of physical form, she still exists. She still thinks and feels and is very much still in possession of personhood. By the end of the film, Alex is of the same mindset, a Descartian. What makes him human is not how much of his physical form is still organic, but in his feelings and actions. The metal detector joke at the end encapsulates this. Even disassembled and smuggled through the airport piece by piece, he doesn't cease to be human. And that's the important takeaway. Here in the 21st century, when our identities are reduced to metadata in a database somewhere, and our minds and emotions are manipulated and controlled at macroscopic levels by algorithms and systems in the control of often faceless capitalists and fascists, all to further an agenda counter to our well-being, it's important for us to ask what it is that makes us human. We are more than a data point. We exist as thinking, feeling humans, and no amount of erosion of our individuality and agency will change that. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, it's a cool B-action movie if you're into that sort of thing, but the plot and the themes are a mess. It can't possibly actually be expected to be taken at more than the face value of, hey look, cyborgs and explosions! Well, you're not wrong. Defiant doesn't have a reputation for making thought-provoking movies or telling narratives about philosophy and deep dives into the nature of the self. He's not the Wachowskis. The writer, Rebecca Charles, doesn't have a single other credit, so who can say what her other work is like? The film is very on brand for Payan, though. It's derivative of other works of film and literature, leaning heavily on the tone and themes of William Gibson's wildly influential Sprawl trilogy. The lack of clear exposition makes telling where anyone's allegiances lie at any given time more than a little difficult. The pacing of the story beats is jarring, which also doesn't help. Apart from the philosophy for a moment, this movie is everything I enjoy about 90s B sci-fi and post-apoc movies. It's got grimy characters, running around cool, dilapidated or rubbled locations, shooting each other or chewing scenery with cobbled together props and effects, making the absolute most out of what little they had and just having the best looking time possible. These are the kind of movies that made me go, hey, I can do that. Let's get a camera and go make some shit. Also, the absolute bonkers joy of watching a feeble old lady gun down a harassing cyborg is indescribable.
Please, don't shoot. No more, please.
Teach you to me, fucking cyborgs. Streets aren't safe anymore. Can't even go to the market without meeting some folk.
Shang-Lu takes no shit. I love this town.
This movie is a blast, and a must-watch if you're into this sort of thing. And not like the last time, in a so bad it's good kind of way, it's just good. However, the existential philosophy angle, leaned heavily on in the first half of the movie, and barely mentioned after that, is still what makes this more than your run-of-the-mill movie in the 90s B cyberpunk subgenre, with films like Digital Man or Cybertracker. Not because it mentions the concepts, because plenty of films parrot the themes of Blade Runner, but because it seems to really inform the arc of the characters. It's not set dressing. It has meaning. It's a meaning that resonates with us today as much as it did 30 years ago. We're all human, regardless of the percentage of our biological matter. I think that went better than the last one. I didn't want to get too heavy into the philosophy because I didn't want to bore anyone. What do you think? I agree. I think this will be a good placeholder until we can get that Franchise Wars episode done. Yeah, I can't shoot that till we get the old DSLR working. But if the Patreon takes off, link in the description, then we could get a whole new camera, a really nice one. Ooh, that's a good idea. We could record a whole handful of these and post one whenever we have tech issues or I get too bipolar to be productive. Hey, you want to do the outro today?